Right, we're going to move on now to a recorded interview from St Michael's Hospice in Hereford. We'll hear from the Chief Executive, Matt Fellows, and a palliative care nurse, Hugo Goodbody. And it's actually moderated by one of my colleagues, who is Helen Hurst, a Queen's nurse, I might add, and leads in terms of hospice work stream in my team. So can we play the video, please?
My name's Helen Hurst, and I'm interviewing this afternoon Matt Fellows, who's Chief Executive at St Michael's Hospice, and his colleague Hugo Goodbody, who is a former Royal Marine and now palliative care nurse at St Michael's Hospice. So we're just going to ask you a few questions and just have a discussion sort of about being going through the Veteran Aware programme to become accredited. So, Matt, my first question is to you. How do you reconcile your role as Chief Executive to your role when you were in the Army?
I suppose if you look at it from the outside in, there feels like a significant difference between being an officer in the military, in my case in the Army as a gunner officer, and being the chief executive of a hospice. But actually there's lots and lots of similarities. You know, as an organisation, we employ about 330-ish paid colleagues. We've got over 800 volunteers. So at any one time, there's about 1,000 people working in support of St Michael's. So scale-wise, you know, in terms of the size of a good-sized military unit. But then also, if you look from the outside in, you might think of a hospice as being about inpatient care, about beds, about health and social care. But actually, we do that. But actually, we do significantly more than that. So, you know, we have to pay a significant number of our own bills. So we've got a £7 million charity retail business. We've got a 55,000 square feet shop, as an example. We've got a lottery that generates £500,000 a year. We've got a facilities team, housekeeping, catering, you know, and all of the things that go across an organisation like this, all to the extent of digital marketing and comms. So actually the diversity that exists in a hospice, because we're independent and we're normally a sole organisation, that's comparable to a good-sized military unit having to be independent and act and operate on its own. So that diversity exists too. Actually, most of the challenge is about leading and managing people, about creating a great organisational culture, about focusing on values and behaviours and actions. And those things are really similar for me to my service in the military.
So Hugo, coming to you, from being a former Royal Marine, how do you approach changing your career to being a palliative care nurse at St Michael's?
So, you know, as I was thinking about leaving the Marines, you know, I was very lucky that, you know, in some respects, I was still very young. I'd only had a career of, you know, 4.5 years. And so it meant that changing careers wasn't as much of a leap and potentially a big financial step backward that it would be for a lot of veterans. So I was able to essentially leave and, you know, rely on family a lot to then enable me to transition into a completely new career, and meant that I could basically finance a degree, you know, using just normal channels and the NHS bursary scheme. And from that, doing my nursing degree, you do lots of different placements in lots of different settings, and palliative care stood out to me, you know, very early on as something that I wanted to specialise in, because, you know, the goals of palliative care are very clear and kind of understood. And ultimately, we want to, you know, palliate people's symptoms, make them comfortable, and just allow them to do and achieve things that they want to do and achieve towards the end of their life. And I think that makes a huge amount of sense, and it's definitely something that, you know, resonated with me, and you know, meant that it was very easy to choose that particular speciality in nursing.
Oh, perfect. And Matt, when I got in touch with you and you first heard about the NHS Veteran Aware accreditation programme, what were your initial thoughts about it?
So actually, it came at a really good time for us as an organisation. I've been in post for about 18 months now. So I think when we first spoke, I was in perhaps coming to the end of my first 6 months. So as an organisation, we had committed to, signed up to the Armed Forces Covenant a little bit before my time. And we'd also made a commitment around the Employer Recognition Scheme, the MOD Employer Recognition Scheme, and have received the Bronze Award. But actually, in the big scheme of things, those two actions didn't really take us a significant degree further forward in terms of our support to or our commitment to the armed forces community or the service community, given that we're in Herefordshire. And what it did was it provided a really, not bounded, but a really strong framework to enable us to put not only the commitments that we've made to date into action, but it gave us that framework to be able to move from step to step through the process of recognising what we'd already been doing, what we'd learned, what the good practice was that was already here, but it's also enabled us through that process to get to the next step. So we have just been recognised as a silver award holder now under the Employer Recognition Scheme, and that's as a result of the progress we're making alongside Veterans Aware accreditation.
Well, congratulations on your ERS Silver Award. Hugo, with that, what impact has the hospice commitment to the Armed Forces Covenant and now your ERS Silver Award had on your work or initiatives at the hospice that you're involved in?
So I haven't seen a huge amount, regarding the Silver Awards at work specifically, but I would say that from my time starting at St Michael's Hospice, there's a huge connection with the armed forces straight away, and I think that relates quite strongly to the Silver Award. We have a large amount of veterans and their families, being cared for here, and it's lovely to meet them and chat with them. And although not related directly to the Silver Awards, I think there's just quite a strong kind of family connection with the armed forces, specifically here at St Michael's.
I don't know, Matt, you've been facing quite a lot of challenges in the hospice sector, and when I came up and saw the hospice, we kind of discussed what they were. I know that you have made kind of those difficult decisions kind of a while ago, so that you were, you've got a great community up there, and that you're getting, because like you say, you've got how much, 7 million or something that you have to raise every year to fund the hospice. And how those, have there been challenges as well, like with the accreditation process? So how is that kind of with your everyday work? Because I always appreciate that going through this process is added extra workload onto the others on your steering group that I've met as well, with Nicola.
So I suppose from my perspective, it's really important that when an organisation commits to the Armed Forces Covenant or the Employer Recognition Scheme or becoming Veterans Aware, that they're really clear about the reasons why they're doing that. And for me, the reason why we made the commitment about becoming Veteran Aware was multifaceted. One was it provided this really straightforward framework in the support that exists from people like you, Helen, to enable organisations to take that step-by-step process of really embedding not just becoming veteran aware, but becoming veteran friendly, becoming more aware of the service family, actually recognises some of the great things that we're already doing. The second thing is actually, we this year, so if we take this year's numbers, it will cost about £13 million to run St Michael's. We receive about £2.5 million of that from the National Health Service. So the gap's 10 and a bit million pounds. Our community, we're very fortunate, support us by generating those funds for us. Herefordshire is a county of about 200,000 people. That means that we're looking at £50 for every man, woman and child in the county of Herefordshire. 6.5% of our adult population are serving or former serving personnel. And so it's really important that we've got a great relationship with them. It's really important that we're recognising them and their role, their place in our community, their place in our place. But it's also really important, given that actually there's lots of veteran-owned businesses in Herefordshire too. And we've got a great reliance on our partnership with local businesses. We want to buy locally. We want to be supported by local businesses. So actually, there is a commercial imperative for organisations, I think particularly those that are in areas of high concentration of service personnel and of veterans and veterans businesses, there's a commercial imperative to being veteran aware, to be committed to the armed forces community too. And I suppose if those are your driving purposes for becoming veteran aware in this case, with the Veterans Covenant Healthcare Alliance, then actually it's not an added extra. It's part of your mainstream business as usual activity. It becomes a strategic need rather than an operational want. And once we'd identified that and we're really clear about that, actually it becomes something that we should be focusing and spending a great deal of time on.
Oh, I mean, I know that you're doing so much work, and yeah, Hugo, just how will you promote being veteran aware to your patients and your colleagues? We're going to get you through this accreditation process. You're doing some great stuff. So, and I know from speaking to Matt and Nicola that this is all going on in the background and how you're embedding it into everyday care, But how will you promote that when you become veteran aware accredited?
I think the biggest thing is just as an approach to nursing, especially palliative nursing, it's about getting to know your patients. And I think fundamentally it's about asking the question for people, with various illnesses who may not be as keen to, tell you that they're a veteran of the armed forces. And I think, not only from the caring aspect and being able to then, talk to them about these experiences, or, if they want to, but also from a kind of social care aspect. Any funding pots that might be available to them that they don't know about, if they've got diseases that perhaps, are quite chronic and they're going on for a long time, there's, funding streams available to them that they might not know about. And that's something that for me, if I find out about, I can escalate with our amazing social care team to see what's out there and to basically care for them much better than we would do, without knowing.
Oh, that's great. It's that personalised care, isn't it? Makes all that difference, doesn't it, to them then, and that support that you can give them.
And as a veterans community, Helen, we're pretty rubbish at identifying ourselves. We will tell other veterans. I'll talk to Hugo about our shared experiences. Whilst we didn't share them, we have some shared experiences. And I'll talk to others about it, but I wouldn't necessarily think about coming into a health and social care space, particularly a hospice, and raising my hand and saying, actually, I'm a veteran, because I don't know what difference it makes. I don't know where that additionality is. And actually, I don't know how I'm going to be received. So this piece about asking the question, critically important, because we can't do anything if we aren't aware. And as Hugo's pointed out, the driver for lots of our colleagues in care is about personalisation. And treating the person about what matters to them. So getting to know patients critically important.
No, definitely, and I think that's one of the key questions that we or one of the key standards that we point out, because once isn't it, who that community is, because otherwise they do remain hidden, don't they, and will go under the radar. But if there's support that can be provided, even if it's like fuel tokens to the family so that they can visit more often and that kind of thing, those little things make all the difference to that person, isn't it, that patient.
This part of the world, knowing your place. The world special force, the global centre of special forces is Hereford. And we're talking particularly about our special forces community. They're a community that are even worse at identifying, because there's positive encouragement not to identify. And actually being able to overcome some of those things. That's why it's also really important that we've got great veterans in our workforce too, because actually they're more likely to feel comfortable about having that conversation with a fellow veteran than they might be with somebody who isn't a veteran.
Yes. Oh no, it's brilliant actually. I think that's the whole thing, isn't it, under the Armed Forces Covenant of what the work you're doing, but it's making them everybody, and which is what hospice is great at, is that inclusive care, isn't it, to everybody there then. And Matt, what are the benefits for the hospice you're finding going through the accreditation process? And would you recommend the programme to other hospices?
So as a hospice, and given that the vast majority of our hospices are independent, we sort of act a bit like a superhero. We want to solve all people's ills, and yet we're not miracle workers. We can't prevent an individual's death, but what we can do is we can add days or life to their days rather than days to their lives, which is really important. But we don't have to do that alone. Actually, through this process, recognizing and engaging with all of the other organizations and individuals, whether they be large national charities or local charities and organizations who are supporting the veterans community, but also the service community, means that we're not doing that alone. We're doing that much more in partnership with other organizations and in collaboration with really trusted organizations that our patients and their families are already engaged with. There is that commercial imperative that I touched on earlier on. We've got to be really clear about why we're doing this piece of work. But actually, in places with large centres of mass for all the military, whether that be here in Herefordshire, whether it be down in Portsmouth, whether it be on Salisbury Plain, actually the military is ingrained in those places. Whether you are a serving person or a former serving person, it's part of the local community. It's part of its history. It's part of its culture. And so being a really proactive part of that community, recognising the value of that community, it's important to our importance to our place, the importance of the military to Herefordshire. It is also really important in terms of making sure that we're fulfilling our responsibilities. If we're generating £10.5 million from the people of Herefordshire, we've got to be for the people of Herefordshire too.
I'd like to say thank you to both, for all your hard work and support to the armed forces community, and for taking part in this interview today, so that other hospices can see the work that you're doing and the benefits that you're finding and sharing them with you. So thank you both. It's been a real privilege to speak to you both.
Right. Thanks, Helen.
Thanks, Helen.
Probably worth pointing out actually that Matt and Hugo aren't actually here because they're on an awards ceremony for all the work they're doing with the armed forces community. So I think that was a really good session, and thank you to Helen as well for being the moderator, although we were 1 minute 45 seconds over the allotted time.